Hey, Charles here with Rocky Mountain, and today I'm going to show you how to inspect your one-way clutch and your centrifugal clutch on your KRX 1000. It's going to be a similar process for the 2 and the 4-seaters, and typically you're going to have a belt or your primary drive or secondary clutch. You're going to have issues with those first, but if you've inspected those parts or replaced them and are still having issues, whether it's slipping, especially at high speeds, or maybe you have an issue with engine braking or even hear a grinding noise back here, these are the parts you're going to want to check out. So let's go ahead and get into it. All right, so obviously we've already removed some parts from our machine. I've drained the oil. I've raised this machine up and I've got it securely supported. I've removed the wheel, and then we've also removed the primary and secondary clutch. So if you need to know how to remove the clutches, we've got a separate video. Go check that out. From here, we need to get this big old shock out of the way. So we're going to start out by taking that off. Now the first inspection we're going to make is we're going to check the one-way clutch, and we're going to do this before we remove any of these inner covers. You can do this before you remove your primary and secondary clutch. Just make sure the belt's off. All you want to do is make sure the clutch rotates clockwise and doesn't rotate counterclockwise. Now you can move this, but you're going to be rotating the whole engine. So as long as it locks up, and if you have any movement, as long as you know or can feel it actually move the engine, you're good. Now, one more thing, as you rotate this, if it's making a bunch of noise, sounds like it's grinding, then you know that one-way clutch is bad. All right, so if your one-way clutch shows that it's good, like ours, you can put everything back together as long as you don't suspect anything's wrong with the centrifugal clutch. But we're going to show you guys how to do this job anyway, because we know there's enough of these out there that have issues. So next thing we're going to do is pull this thing back off, and then we need to remove all these covers. So there's some hose clamps, there's some electrical connectors, and a couple clips on the back holding wiring in, and then we've just got these screws and bolts on these 2 plastic covers on this inside. All right, so these covers, they normally have some tabs coming off these bolts right here to hold some wiring in place, but these have been broken off a long time ago. And then there's some gaskets that seal everything off on this cover. We're just gonna make sure those stayed in place. So then on this cover, we've got a little O-ring. I'm gonna pull that off, make sure that's in good condition. And then we've got this bracket for that inner clutch cover housing. So with this, we're going to remove the bolts all the way around the perimeter, and then down here in the corner we've got a bracket that holds a support bearing for our drive shaft. So you want to start by loosening that up and then remove the rest of the bolts. And we're also going to pop out the 2 wire loom holders. So I'll just back those 2 bolts on the carrier bearing off, just enough so I can remove this plate. We've got these dowels. That one's a little tight. All right, now before we pull this housing off, I'm gonna clean up around here, make sure I don't get any dirt inside the engine. Beautiful. All right, now I'm just placing a couple rags underneath this housing, just in case any residual oil comes out. But again, we've already drained our oil. So now I'm gonna loosen up all these bolts in a crisscross pattern. We'll remove them and pull the housing straight out. Now the one-way clutch, pay attention, you've got some markings on here. So we've got a green dot, we've got an arrow, and we've got this marking that says outside. So this is how you want the one-way bearing to sit. So we're talking, if you put it in this drum, you should be able to read the outside marking, obviously. And then to inspect this, you're just looking at the sprags. Make sure you don't see any visible damage. If anything's coming apart or looks worn, make sure you get this replaced. Okay, so looking around on this one-way clutch, I do see some wear marks. So while we're in here, we're just gonna get it replaced. This is just gonna pull straight out. Now, for any reason you had a lot of wear with this and you had shavings or whatever, make sure you get all of that cleaned out really well before you go back together. All right, next I'm going to remove this gasket here, and we're gonna remove the centrifugal clutch. So that's gonna require removing all 4 of those bolts. Now I'm gonna use my trusty old clutch holding tool, believe it or not. So initially, this tool, these pins were designed to hold a flywheel, but it's gonna work great to remove this centrifugal clutch. Now with this, there is a special tool from Kawasaki if you wanna get that, but we've already got this clutch holding tool, and it's gonna work great. So we're just gonna go in those pinholes. Then I'm gonna rotate the engine over counterclockwise. We're gonna use an 8mm Allen socket to remove all 4 of these bolts. Then I'll remove that clutch holder, pull the 4 bolts out. And remove the centrifugal clutch. Now over at the bench, we're going to inspect our centrifugal clutches. So on the left, I've got a brand new clutch. That's what you want to see. This is what yours should look like. Obviously the friction material, it's going to be a little more brown once it's soaked in oil, but first thing I'm looking at is wear on that friction material. So if these grooves are mostly worn down and there's not much depth left to them, that's a good indicator that this clutch needs to be replaced. If you're not sure, you can take a measurement. So the digital caliper, this little pin at the end, it's a little wide to get down in those grooves. So I would recommend using a machinist's rule, and you're gonna be able to set that in there. So the groove should be on a new set. You're gonna have 1mm of depth. The limit is 0.5 millimeter. You wanna take a look at the wear. You also wanna take a look at the surface for any discoloration or glazing. So you can see our shoes, these are really shiny and they have that discoloration. So that's one thing that can cause these to slip. The other thing you wanna take a look at is any cracks or missing material. Now with this glazing, if you're on a budget, maybe you're trying to get a few extra miles out of your clutch, one thing you can try is using a little bit of Scotch-Brite. You can rub that on there, and if that shiny surface and discoloration goes away, you can spray all this off and you might be able to get a little bit of extra time on it. But usually when you're in here, you already know something's going on with your clutch, and it's best practice just to get it replaced. The next thing you want to do is inspect your drum. So with this, I've got the brand new drum on the left. You can see this one we have in use. It has kind of a polished surface, and you can see where that friction material was riding. The main thing we want to check here is we want to make sure that this thing isn't discolored or blued. If that's the case, it's gotten hot before and you'd probably want to replace it. The other thing you want to look for is any grooves that are worn into this. So you're going to take your fingernail, run it across, see if you feel anything. So ours is perfectly smooth right here, but you can see that it's kind of a polished surface. So before we put this back into use, we're going to rough that up with our Scotch-Brite. And we're just going to use this in a circular motion. We're just deglazing it, getting rid of that polished surface. That's going to make sure those new shoes get a good grip on this. And I'm going to use a little contact cleaner and a rag to clean this up. And we're also going to clean our gasket sealing surface. Now, if your drum needs to be replaced, make sure you also have a new bearing, a snap ring, and a seal. Now, to get that replaced, all you have to do is remove the seal, pull that snap ring out, and then the drum will press out of the bearing. Once you have your bearing replaced, you can press the drum back in, make sure you have the snap ring fully installed, and then install the seal. Now, back over at the machine, we need to clean up this sealing surface as well. I'm gonna use a rag to cover things up as best as I can, just so I don't drop any material where it shouldn't be. All right, since we're installing this new centrifugal clutch, this is just like any other friction material. We want to make sure we have oil on it, and we're actually going to let this soak for a little bit before we install it. All right, now to install the clutch, we have this little hole at the top. It's going to line up with this dowel pin. Make sure that is in place on the engine side. And then for the 4 mounting bolts, the manual is going to tell you to use a moly grease and engine oil solution. To apply to these, I'm just going to use assembly lube. We're going to thread these in, and we're going to torque them to 93.7 foot-pounds. And then the tightening sequence for this is top, bottom, right, then left. Next, we're going to set our dowel pins in place. Then I'll install the new gasket, and I'm using just a little bit of grease to help hold this in place. Now, underneath our drum, we have that bearing. I just want to make sure that it's got some oil on it, so I'm going to spray some assembly lube down in there. Give that a quick turn, work that in there. Now for the one-way clutch, we've got that green dot. It's going to be facing out. It also says outside. If you have this snap ring facing out, that's going to be the wrong way, or the circlip. So make sure you have that in the correct orientation. Make sure you have some oil on this. So that's kind of a tight fit, but we've got it pressed all the way down in there. And we can install the housing. And we can just make sure and verify this is working correctly. So it rotates clockwise, doesn't rotate counterclockwise. Now for this housing, we're going to install 9 of the bolts first. We're going to torque them to 15 foot-pounds. We're going to leave these front 2 spots open for now. And we're just going to tighten those in a crisscross pattern. All right, next we're going to make sure we have these 2 dowel pins in place. Our plate was pretty stuck to those before, so I'm going to apply just a little bit of anti-seize on them. Keep those parts from rusting together. I'm going to set this plate in place and pay attention to these wires. Make sure you don't pinch them. We need to go in front of that prop shaft bracket. Press it down on the dowel pins. Then we're going to have the 4 larger bolts that we removed. 2 in the top, 2 in the bottom. We have these 2 longer bolts with the washers. Those are going to be for this clutch housing. And that's going to leave us with 3 remaining bolts. So these 2 longer ones, they're going to be for this bracket down here. So shorter one in the back. And for the bracket, we've got the nut and washer on the back side. Then we're going to go through and torque all of the bolts down. These front 2 are going to be 15 foot-pounds. Then we've got the 4 big bolts at 30 foot-pounds. Then we've got that bolt in the back coming in at 18 foot-pounds. And then we have the bracket bolts at 18 foot-pounds as well. And we can reinstall the wire retainers. Next, we've got this O-ring. I'm going to apply a little bit of grease to it. Slide it onto that clutch housing. And I just want to make sure everything's clean before I put it back together. So make sure the air ducts are clear. You also want to wipe any grime out of your housing. And on the back side, make sure you have those gaskets in place. And then again, we are missing 2 wiring brackets, but pay attention to those as you set this in place. We're going to make sure we have our clamp in place as well. And with this, just make sure the cover sits down in place easily. You want to make sure there's no pinch wires on the back side. And then for these 5 bolts in the back, one of my collars actually fell out, so just verify that these collars are there. And then when you tighten these, you're not putting much torque on them. We're going to 80 inch-pounds. We've got our sensor, and we've got our inlet. Again, we've got this hose clamp on there already. Next, we're going to install the inner cover and the 4 screws. When you tighten these, make sure you do it by hand because you don't want to over tighten them and strip them out since you're just going into plastic. Next, we're going to put the shock back in place. As you do this, just make sure you get everything lined up. You're going to have to move your trailing arm up and down while you install the bolts. All right, now for these nuts, Kawasaki recommends replacing them, or if you don't, at least put a little blue Loctite on there. And then we're going to torque these to 70.4 foot-pounds. Then we're going to set the shock guard in place and tighten the screws. All right, so that's it for inspecting and replacing the one-way clutch and the centrifugal clutch on your KRX 1000, whether it's the 2 or the 4-seater. If you need parts for your machine, you can find that stuff on our website. Some of this stuff, you're just gonna head over to the OEM diagrams. We've got great deals there, orders over $75 ship free. And if you have any questions about this process, make sure to leave them down in the comments. We'll try to get those answered. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more helpful content. I'm Charles with Rocky Mountain ATV MC. Thanks for watching.